Contested ground, exposing the strategies and tactics of grey zone warfare as actors compete for power and influence below the threshold of armed conflict.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of Contested Ground. Welcome to our studio. We're back live in person. Often we're different far-flung parts of Australia and the world, and we dial in over the marvels that is Zoom. But today we're in the studio. It's where I like to operate. I feel as though you get a much more authentic podcast when you can eyeball someone and see how they respond and squirm in their seat when you're giving them some insight, exactly what you think about something in particular. One of those would be my regular co-host, Marcus Thompson, Major General retired. How you going?
Good to see you. G'day, Phil. Good to see you, and nice to be face-to-face in the studio.
Yeah, I don't know about this arm sort of coming over there. I reckon you can put it down and maybe move it around a little bit, but it's putting me off a little bit, but
I'll do something.
Maybe we can work that out. How you been? It's good to see you.
Yeah, fabulous, thanks. Yep. Nice to be back in Sydney for a quick visit.
And you came up yesterday, I'd imagine, or you here for the weekend, were you?
No, I just came up this morning.
Okay.
And I'll head home tomorrow.
So do you have an view talking about social contest? Do you have a view of what we saw pan out on the Sydney Harbour Bridge yesterday? Obviously, the numbers are still a bit opaque, but I think they're calling 90,000 people marched across the Harbour Bridge, very visible and emotive scenes. Which would have been panned right across the world with the coat hanger there. Lots to be taken from that, but certainly contest there amongst our communities.
Oh, absolutely. And so I think and the contest even between the event organisers and local law enforcement about how many people were there. You know, I think I saw something from New South Wales Police that said they estimated 90,000 people on the in the march, whereas the organisers were saying something about double that. So there's contest within contest within contest.
Yeah, there certainly is. And what I do note from that, and I thought the cops actually communicated very effectively in regards to they didn't take a view or a position on the protests themselves, but they were very much focused on the safety and security of people there. And they were saying, hey, they were right at the edge there.
Yeah, 100%. And it was nice to see some senior folk from New South Wales Police, just talking about the importance of public safety. And then there was some reports afterwards, some commentary from the New South Wales Premier that implied that he's not altogether happy with that iconic landmark, being the option of first resort for political process. Yeah,
and I think we need to be careful with that because, one of the great things about being Australian and in Australia is, the right to protest and free speech. However, we need to be careful that sometimes those apparatus and historic things aren't utilised or leveraged for the wrong reasons.
But the irony that the Sydney Harbour Bridge has always been a part of political protest. From the day it was opened, when what's his name, De Groot came through with his sword to cut the ribbon before I think it was Jack Lang before he actually got the scissors out.
Yeah, no, it's it's got a symbolic history, and no doubt it will continue to be a centerpiece for celebrating all that is great about Australia, and one of that being the diversity that we have here as a nation. So we'll pick that up, I think, and debrief on that another time because there's still quite a lot of information coming out and insights, particularly Australia's position on it, what's happening in Gaza and the Middle East. But that's not why we're here today. We have a guest in the studio, and we're pretty protective of this podcast, so we don't bring all and sundry in there to have a yarn with us. But you suggested to bring someone onto the podcast to me a couple of weeks ago, and I thought that would be excellent. And unfortunately, his travel has brought him out to Australia, maybe to watch some football games. But we've hijacked that and persuaded him to come into the studio. Simon Bergman, who's the CEO of M+C Saatchi World Services. We're going to have a good chat, I think, with Simon. Now, I'm big on disclosure and transparency.
Sure thing.
And from what I understand, you've recently joined M+C Saatchi or World Services in advisory capacity to support on some of the work they do with government here in Australia. So we'll get into that. But Simon, welcome.
Nice to be here. Nice to be in Australia. Slightly dismayed by the football result, the rugby result on Saturday. But a great game to watch. And great to see the Wallabies coming back so strong and playing great rugby. So I was privileged to be there, getting very wet on Saturday at the stadium. But it's always nice to be back in Australia.
Well, what I would say about the Lions tourists is that they're probably more vocal than Australians on maybe the state of Australian rugby at the moment. And it's like you feel as though you need some stronger competition. You keep reminding us that maybe this is a foundational stage for Australian rugby, and when you guys get better, we can have a more competitive game moving forward. I keep hearing a lot of that from the Lions supporters.
Well, I think any of that narrative was dismissed on Saturday evening.
It was.
With the Wallabies playing extremely well, and it's nice to see so many young players doing really well in front of a national crowd. So despite all the Lions fans coming out here, and they had 2 good results, I think Saturday was a fair result, and it's great to see Australian rugby coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what it also shows is that you can't win it all the time. And no doubt your career, you've been in many different situations and in many different roles where you've probably won more than you've lost. But in contest, there's always largely a winner and a loser. Often we look for a win-win or win-win-win. But no doubt knowing the type of work that Marcus used to do back when he was in uniform, and from the very small understanding I have around World Services, you operate in a very interesting space, supporting governments, working with them or giving them greater leverage to their capabilities around influence operations in and around the type of work that they do. So we've got to put some rails up, what we can chat about today, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of folks tuning into this going, that sounds very curious and I'd like to know more. So I'm in your hands, guys, how wide and deep you want to go. But Simon, let's kick off with a bit about you. What's the backstory to get you in a position where you're the CEO of World Services?
So I'm an ex-military officer, like Marcus. I elected to jump out a little bit earlier, but I spent the latter part of my career in the information operations space, spending a lot of time in the Balkans, Kosovo, Bosnia, and also did tours of Iraq and Afghanistan, basically working for the British military, conducting information operations, supporting objectives and aims. Mainly in the Balkans was about peace and tolerance, about bringing communities back together and putting a cease to hostilities. And then latter in Iraq and Afghanistan, supporting the aims of trying to rebuild some societies, trying to get things back to where they were through mechanisms and means of communication. So I jumped out of the army in about 2007 after 22 years and set up M+C Saatchi World Services in one of the biggest advertising agencies in the world, M+C Saatchi. And we've been building the business ever since. And we work to bringing the best from the commercial sector from a global advertising agency and focusing that on national security requirements for both Australia, UK, and America.
So myself and Marcus, we recorded a podcast probably 6 months ago where we're sort of, just riffing off how do you leverage all those skills and capabilities that happen in and around influence operations inside of the military and deploy them in a commercial sense. Yeah. And I think there's great relevance to that. Yeah. Well, what you're talking about here, Simon, is the inverse of that. So how do you leverage all that happens inside of advertising agencies and this genre of sort of content creation and leveraging information to shape and persuade and influence decision-making? How do you deploy that back into government and national security? So same but different. When you left the military, was it like hey, we could do with a bloke like you to head this thing up over here? Well,
I think I'd spent a lot of time thinking about it, having spent a lot of time deployed on operations, trying to, I'd like to think a gifted amateur, doing my best in terms of trying to communicate with communities and influence populations. And I think the recognition was, even though we were very good at what we did, that there was a real understanding we could learn from the commercial sector. And so I wanted to go and work in a large advertising agency to find out what I didn't know and to learn the kind of issues that were going from there. Interestingly, one of the first things I kind of got ahead of was the commercial sector's requirement to be ahead of the game, to be embracing technology, to be using innovation. Because in the commercial sector, if you don't do that, you lose out to your competitors and you lose. And I think in the government component of it, we'd been using techniques and tools that were slightly outdated. And so we were never going to win the information battle because we weren't using the right tools and capabilities and people. So I think that's I had this idea of that was how it was going to be. And when I got to the advertising agency, that's when I found out. And, I'd like to be very clear about this. I still think today that government should be partnering with industry and the commercial sector to enable it to achieve its objectives better. It's not about handing it over to the commercial sector. It's about partnering in the right space to make sure you're utilizing the best of technologies. And in the information space right now, things are changing monthly, if not weekly, if not daily, in terms of how you reach and influence audiences. And government is not agile enough to do that on its own. It has to partner with industry. And partnering with the best from the commercial advertising sector in where I operate is probably a good idea.
So partnering, teaming, is it a new thing for government or militaries and the private sector? We see it across the development of programs here in Australia, whether it's very tangible stuff like building ships or other sort of kit. But knowing the creative industries as I know them, I'm quite interested to see how that partnering works with what would be a bureaucratic, a very regimented military versus what would often be a very creative and quirky creative industry, right? Do the two things mesh well?
Well, you have to have the you have to have the interpreters.
Yeah.
So a lot of our staff at World Services are actually ex-government and ex-military, and from all organs of government, and we utilise them because the last thing we want to do is put a strategist or a creative director directly in front of a government person because they just don't speak the same language. So we have a lot of people in the business who, like myself, have come out of government, have spent time, and the best hybrid actually is people who were reservists, who come from the creative sector but have done time in uniform, all working for government. And we were a hybrid. And World Services is a hybrid. If you go and look at the staff makeup, we've got some amazing people from the best advertising agencies, the best communications, best media agencies in the world. But we've also got some of the best people who have worked in government. And I'm very fortunate to have convinced Marcus to join us as an advisor. And he's a good example of that. And we have people all the way from the old and the bold like myself and Marcus, all the way down to some young 22, 23-year-olds who've got a grip of the cutting edge of technology and are able to frame information campaigns in a way that's viable and relevant to the audiences we're trying to communicate with. So
this would be a lot of language that you're familiar with, Marcus, from your time in uniform. How long have you guys known each other? What's the backstory on the connection?
Oh, well, 100%. It's almost identical language to what my team and I were. Well, to that which my team and I were using sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, which is when Simon and I first met. So I had an engagement with some local members of Simon's team, and just telling me about what World Services does and the capabilities that they bring, and you sort of as I thought through it, you thought, gee, right, intuitively this just makes complete sense. Like, if you want people who know how to craft and deliver a narrative, a message, well, advertisers are pretty good at that, and with World Services having its genus in, one of the largest, if not the largest, advertising company in the world, you think, okay, well, that makes sense. And then bringing all of those techniques and tools from advertising into, influence campaigns, information operations, and I know, Phil, you and I have spoken about this before, where old school information operations, military deception, psychological operations. These are not new. These have been around since Moses was a child. What's new and what's brought it all back into relevance certainly for contemporary military operations? If I just focus on that for a minute, given my our respective backgrounds, it's with the advent of cyberspace, it's the speed and scale with which those operations can be conducted, which is got all contemporary military, national security organisations and agencies, just thinking about the use of narrative from a from an influence perspective, but also had to defend against misinformation and disinformation being directed your way, and and this is where the capabilities the unique capabilities that M+C Saatchi World Services is bringing to the market. When Simon said, "Well, how about it, Marcus? Would you be interested in doing some work with me?" I mean, it was a very short conversation.
We chat about this verbatim, and you're still connected with your community of people that you worked with back in uniform. But the speed and agility in this sector is just extrapolating rapidly. Simon, how are you finding it from, if you think back to maybe your time in the Balkans, things probably moved a lot slower then comparative to today. How do you keep up with it all?
Well, back then we didn't think it was slow, but looking back now, it was slightly different. It was a different era. Radio broadcast, magazines, printed magazines. If we remember what those were like. Were our tools. That's what we use to reach people. And I used to teach psychological operations for British military, and we used to read back to the broadcast that the political warfare executive used to do during the Second World War, broadcasting to German troops in France. Interesting, and we hadn't moved that far on in the 90s. We were still using radio, FM radio, AM radio as a broadcast mechanism.
Oh, it's worse than that. I remember 2014 in Afghanistan, we were still doing radio broadcasts, printed newspapers.
It's funny you say that, because I read a piece in a paper yesterday, and they were talking about Lord Haw and Tokyo Rose as mechanisms for those practices back in World War II, and just drawing analogues with that today with the leverage points people are using for social media and shaping what's the issues and sentiments towards Gaza. So it's all still there. It just happens very, very differently. So no doubt the creative people they used to find back 80, 100 years ago, they still exist today. They're still out there. You can find people that actually want to do this work, noting that when you actually say to maybe a young graduate or a practitioner that hasn't got military experience, well, this is the work we're doing. This is the outcome we want. How do you feel about that?
I think generally, look, a majority of people in the creative arts are probably left of centre, which is a great thing. But we're working on some of the biggest challenges in society today. Supporting democratic governments in the prosecution of foreign policy and security policy is so important. And the majority of our staff who are on that side of everything that's in society that's right run towards us because we give them the opportunity. Now, managing them is a challenge, and it's a great challenge because they're phenomenally smart. They feel the right way about things in society, and we just give them the opportunity to do it. And I think it's been interesting, with democracies electing certain leaders. We've had to have some conversations there. But basically, World Services operates for democratically elected governments in their prosecution of their foreign policy, and that is a good thing. And if you offer up to be in the most technologically advanced business that's doing that globally, it's very attractive to young talent. And we run an intern scheme in the UK. I'm going to convince my Matt, who's down here, to do one down here at some point. But we have 6 places on that intern scheme. We had over 1,000 applicants for those 6 places this summer, for people who are, young, smart, and want to get into communications, but don't want to sell sugary drinks to children or sell another automobile to somebody who's already got one. We're offering, come on, help us solve some of the world's biggest problems. Having come through COVID and seen, the devastating effect of that and what misinformation and disinformation did during that crisis, offering people the chance to make a difference in the world, it's very exciting. It's very exciting. And I'm very proud of the staff we have in the business. They get up every morning determined to make the world a better place.
So lots to pick up there. Misinformation, disinformation, which is pretty much a common theme or an ongoing theme with this particular podcast, but then also leveraging the skills and capabilities of individuals to support the national imperative. Now, fortunately, Australia, a lot of them are attracted into our armed forces, and there's obviously some challenges there for our decision makers in terms of how do we continue to grow and evolve that and attract the right people into there. But for those people who potentially don't choose that as an option, to actually know there is other ways that they can support the national mission. And do you find that with younger crew who are joining your business, is that one of the reasons why they want to do it, outside of maybe the creative endeavors they can craft inside of an organization like yours?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I took the choice at 18, 19 to go and sit in a wet field on behalf of Her Majesty, which is a choice. And some of the young people say don't want to do that, but they do feel strongly about issues. And I think, and interestingly, with a lot of our staff, they join the business, start going down the road of working national security, and then they join the reserve. Or they kind of like, oh, this is interesting, how can I get more involved? So I think it's a good conduit for that. But not everybody wants to put a uniform on. Not everybody wants to be shouted at by a sergeant major somewhere. But most of the young people today care about the values that matter in society. And I think that's kind of where we come from. So we do. We're not just a catch-all for people who didn't join the military. We ask a number of questions of our potential staff. Are you interested in the world? Do you care about making a better place? And are you a good member of a team? And if we get people who are like that, we can genuinely move them in the right direction, and they have a lot to offer.
So curious about how you operate and the type of work that you do, and we'll get into that. We'll just go to a quick break, everyone. Stay with us, back in a moment. Welcome back. Phil Tarrant, co-host of Contested Ground with Marcus Thompson, and our guest today, Simon Bergman, CEO of World Services. Now, Simon, a lot of the chats I had with Marcus, he's been very deliberate to only talk about sort of defensive operations. He's never spoken about offensive operations and some of the work he was doing in information warfare. Just quite curious about the remit in which you operate for or with here in Australia, and it's up to you to disclose as much as you want in relation to who you work for. But do you have a mandate to actually operate in that regards? Are you sort of deep inside of the capability enhancements for Australian operators and Australian operatives in the organisations or the departments which are charged for prosecuting that type of work? Do you get involved in that type of work yourselves?
Well, I'm obviously not. I'm not Australian, and I haven't got the right level of clearance.
Not you, sir, but some of the people that you work for.
You would, and I advise you to have a follow-up podcast with my MD from down here who is Australian.
Oh, we'll do that.
Who may be able to answer that question clearly. Just let me talk more generically about the clients who we work with, which is generally the Five Eyes community, NATO. The majority of the work we do is bound by legal constraints, a bunch of authorities about what those governments and what those militaries are willing and able to do. And that's fascinating. And the legal constraints is really interesting because in the information space, the consequence of using information in an inappropriate way can have legal consequences for the country that does it. And we obviously operate within that. And we obviously operate within things like GDPR in Europe, which is regulations about data and data protection and individuality. But, we are very close to our clients and we work from supporting them in their operations globally in terms of what they do. And I have staff who are embedded with the military, going alongside them, because as we said earlier, it's a partnership. And we help them prosecute their operations. And a lot of the work we do is about countering misinformation and disinformation from adversaries. Countries that are trying to achieve objectives that are counter to what we stand for as democracies. And that's, and one of the examples of that, and I'll give you a good example, is the best way to talk about it, is one of the governments we worked for was very keen during COVID to dispel misinformation and disinformation about where COVID came from. So we generated a bunch of information campaigns and a bunch of platforms, not giving counter propaganda, but actually pointing individuals and communities towards credible news sources, the BBC, CNN, and a bunch of other more local pieces that were giving credible answers to the questions that were being asked and undermining narratives that were being put out there by potential adversaries about where COVID had come from for their own policy objectives. So the answer to the question is, I'm not going to answer specifically about the Australian government, but I will say for the governments we work for, and we work for NATO as well, that we help prosecute their information campaigns in a defensive way to support their objectives. And when required, and if required, we can also help across other areas as well.
And this is the challenge for Western nations, Five Eyes nations, in relation to the regulatory regime they operate within when conducting operations, whether it's kinetic or to the work Simon's talking about there, countering dis and misinformation. In many ways, you're governed by how you operate and how you can deploy those skills within the realms of what is regarded to be right and wrong, whereas adversaries don't necessarily operate like that. So often you're fighting, pardon the pun, with one hand behind your back. What is it? Do you think about?
It can sometimes feel like that, but but those authorities, those laws of armed conflict, rule of law, we got to celebrate those things, Phil. I mean that's what sets our societies and that's what sets our society and those societies around the world that are like us here in Australia. It's what sets us apart from dictatorships and other less desirable forms of government. Certainly, by our standards and our values. You're right, and sometimes it can feel like you're fighting with one arm behind your back, even at times for kinetic operations, let alone non-kinetic information type operations. But those constraints are there for good reason. And from a military perspective, Phil, you've heard me say it countless times before. It is laws of armed conflict, rule of law, rules of engagement that separates professional soldiers from barbarians. I just didn't want to leave that there hanging just like that.
No, absolutely, and you answer that as I absolutely would have expected you to, which is the right way to do it. And fortunately, we're governed by those moral and ethical aspects which shape how we choose to fight. But when we're talking about maybe the type of work World Services is doing for the governments it supports, the idea of win without fighting, gaining information dominance, controlling a narrative. These are the tactical and strategic aspects of the work you do every single day. Do the ideas flow constantly in relation to this, or is there sort of doctrinal disciplines that you just hark back to and just keep delivering on what works?
Well, I think we would like to think we are innovative and imaginative. And that the reality is, some of the people we have in our business are geniuses at coming up with new approaches. There's nothing worse. And I saw this when I was in uniform, literally dusting off the leaflets that we'd used in Macedonia to use in Iraq, but changing the Cyrillic into Arabic. The wrong way to do anything. We have a very clear view that good information campaigns are based on research, strategy, and understanding of the environment and the audiences you're trying to influence, with linked to what is reality going to work. So, and also that's about mechanisms. It's about means. It's about channels. All kind of in that space. And it's interesting if you look at where we're going today, and if even brands are now doing this. Brands are no longer commissioning big advertising agencies to make adverts. They're getting brand ambassadors, influencers to take the message for them. And we utilize all of those tools and techniques. And it depends where we are in the world. I mean, as World Services, we're a reasonably large communications agency. I don't have a creative director because I have different creative directors for where we're operating in the world. Because operating in South America is different to operating in the Middle East, which is different to operating in Southeast Asia. So we take, and our audience, our staff are based all around the world. They come from everywhere. The languages we speak, we probably cover most languages that the world has. Most, and there's some that we don't cover. But the ability to understand and to construct information campaigns that achieve objectives is critical. And it's why after 15 years, we're still growing. We grow 25% year on year. I have to turn clients down because we haven't got the capacity and we don't feel right now that we should be taking them on. Because what we do is fairly unique and we have got a great reputation across the right governments in terms of doing it legally, ethically, and in line with their objectives.
That diversity would be key, and yes, you can learn to speak a language. However, that cultural connectivity would be the subtleties around any operation that you would undertake, and finding those skills and capabilities of people that can do that and know that is probably the secret sauce no doubt. I'm really curious about leveraging influences in the type of work that you do today, because that's relatively a unique concept. Back in the good old days, you could probably rock up somewhere in the Balkans and set up a radio station and start transmitting across the airwaves, and people would tune in. But leveraging influences, which are individuals largely, to support the objectives of what you're trying to achieve. How does that work out? Is that sort of
on paper it looks complex, but actually, when you look at what we're trying to achieve across different environments, it's in line with what they're trying to achieve. Stopping interference in your country from another country. Majority of young people are all over that, and so we've set up entertainment platforms that promote national feelings of national identity, feelings of being the pride of where you come from, and so it's you. Generally, in the communication space, you have to pay an influencer to take your message. In the majority of operations, they're taking the message on our behalf and reaching their audiences, which are very large, with the message, because it's in line with how they think about things. So it's not actually about setting up a program, shadily paying somebody off to say something for you. It is giving them or seeding content that they will then take on because they believe in it. And interestingly, what we found again across multiple environments is that they'll adapt that content to their own end and reinforce those objectives at the right level. And so as long as you're in the right space on this, and look, ultimately, where the places where we're competing, the adversaries out there, and we know who we're talking about, the adversaries for Australia, for the UK, for the US, are very good in the information environment. They see it as a critical component of national power, of operating to achieve their objectives. Getting it up against that, and we've talked about this before, but the reality is we should be very good at this. We come from Australia, the US, the UK are the champions of advertising, the champions of communicating. The problem is in a lot of these spaces, we're not competing. So our adversary has a battlefield where they're the only ones on it. So that's interesting, and that's it. But it doesn't take a lot. It takes good objectives. It takes good strategy, and it takes some implementation to contest in those spaces, and ultimately to win.
Well, that's the idea, is to fight and win, and no doubt what you speak to there is the subtleties of influence. So leveraging the private sector to enhance government objectives. Marcus, when you look at that, and you stood up Information Warfare Division for Australia, so very nascent, and I know you fought probably quite hard to try and get that up and running and help chart what would be, and no doubt is a continued emerging part of our joint operations as the ADF. But you're not going to have everything in uniform. You need to draw on the private sector, and to those points, those little subtle arts of shaping the message and narrative, and being able to operate in a way in which maybe would fit outside the traditional bureaucratic sort of doctrinal mindset that you find inside the military. You're probably forward-leaning in thinking about bringing in private sector for this type of work. What would you say to governments, and it could be the Australian government or even Five Eyes nations, about expanding their awareness and mindset around drawing on these capabilities? Because we might not, or we probably don't have that domiciled inside of our ADFs.
Well, I mean, I think more broadly, Phil, and these are lessons that I've learned since stepping out of uniform, or perhaps they're reflections that I've had since stepping out of uniform, is that just the realisation that industry is a big underutilised resource, for our national security community, and I say that for a couple of really good reasons. One is that industry can innovate in a way that government simply cannot. And that's not to say that there are not incredibly smart, innovative people working in government, but they're just always going to be constrained by whatever is the current policy or the time it takes to get an approval or whatever other constraint. They'd just be never, or be very rare for those smart, innovative young folk to be given the freedom to innovate in the way that Simon's team can, and sometimes it's all in the name, right? Simon's used the word, creativity quite frequently today, and creativity and innovation, are typically not words that are associated with government work, and and again, that's not a criticism. It's just the way the government, the Westminster system of government works. It's just really, really hard. So industry can innovate in a way that government cannot. The other thing is industry can scale in a way that government, especially early on. I mean, sure, once small g government makes up its mind and the cogs start turning, typically it's a speed up or get out of the way kind of scenario. But as in those early stages, the ability for industry to scale is just by far and above what anything that government can do. So I think that there are a couple more broad points about the opportunity for government entities and agencies to be using industry. But I think specifically to this discipline is those smarts, those techniques, those tools for developing and delivering messaging and a narrative, and to be designing systems to counter misinformation, disinformation. I mean, this is not some part-time role or a 2-year posting that someone's done a short course and then been given the job to do. This is these folks' career. This is what they do day in, day out for their job, and I think that's the sort of I think the opportunity for government entities, defence and national security agencies, to be getting some help from industry in this area, because you described information warfare capability in defence as nascent. Certainly was in 2017 when we were standing up Information Warfare Division. I'm sure it's moved on and developed and evolved and continues its maturity, but I don't think anyone could in Australia could claim that our information warfare capability is as mature as our land warfare capability, our maritime warfare, our air warfare capability. So quite frankly, getting some help might not be a bad idea.
Well, and to Simon's point, it's certainly contested because the adversary is strong, driven, capable, and focused.
Spot on. And so, if I can, paraphrase Trotsky, you might not be interested in information warfare, but information warfare might be interested in you, because it's happening whether we like it or not, whether we choose to participate or not, whether we choose to get busy and develop capabilities and actually fight in the environment or not. It's happening, and this is our new normal, Phil.
So, from you then, recommendations to government, small g. Around, and we've got some structural concerns with this, because you pick up the paper any given day and they complain about more consultants being drawn into to support government, and it's costing the Australian taxpayers. We should have that as a innate capability inside of our public service. How do we get beyond some of those sort of structural concerns, but also mindset concerns? Because there's still a lot of people there that try and defend their turf, and at the cost or the expense of potentially not having what we need on the battleground. Yeah,
well, and in at the cost of capability.
Absolutely,
quite frankly. Look, Phil, that's an age-old. That's an age-old challenge. There's nothing new in terms of a turf fight or dollars fight in Canberra, for goodness sake. But I think that it's just not black and white. Very few things are, but there are skills and capabilities that are just nigh on impossible to maintain inside government. Nigh on impossible. And that's where, okay, well, so where's the capability? It's in industry. So let's bring industry in, because, whilst you might say inside government, we'll give that a go, see if we can do that ourselves. Well, invariably, Phil, from my experience, that ends up taking more time and costing more money.
Yeah, and the very nature of this work is probably not black or white, or it's not linear. And governments often, particularly regulators, have challenges operating in their environment, and that's fair enough, because that's their view. We've got the Productivity Commission underway right now, and you heard me ranting about that last time we got together, and I think there's some ways around that. But Simon, what I'm really curious about is the future for this type of work, considering the rapid shift and advancement in technology. I want to get into it. We'll just go to another break. Stay with us. Back in a moment. Welcome back. Phil Tarrant, Contest the Ground with Marcus Thompson and Simon Bergman from World Services. Now, the accelerating factor of AI is a vehicle for not only propagating dis and misinformation, and how is that advancing so rapidly? No doubt there's an inverse counter to that, and you and your team are leveraging those skills to try and combat or conduct the operations that you're doing now for the various different customers that you have. What's the future in that regards? Are you guys all going to be out of a job one day and robots will take over and let the smart machines sort of sort this stuff out and fighting against other machines, or is there always going to be a human touch?
Interesting conversation about AI. I think we could do another podcast on that. But look, we are embracing AI, as many businesses are. The communication sector has to. Because it brings efficiencies, it brings speed, it brings rapidity. In my view, it will never completely replace people, simply because it's a supporting tool, it's a supporting aid. It allows you to get production done quicker, easier, cheaper. It allows you to reach audiences quicker. But ultimately, you still need decision makers. And I think we've been monitoring this and embracing tools. And look, the day-to-day working in offices is now easier with some of the AI tools that are out there. And anybody who's not embracing them is pretty dumb, if I'm really honest. I mean, with the caveats of security and, making sure where's your information going, how many searches have you done today? So we've embraced it. We're going through a tech revolution in World Services, where we're pivoting towards a more tech-enabled business. But that's across every place. That's about, instead of having a guy sat at the back taking notes, there's now an AI tool that'll do that for you, and put it into a space which is saving you time. And if you're saving time doing that, it means you can spend more time thinking and strategizing about how you're going to conduct your operations better. So that's interesting for us. But also a lot of the AI technologies that are coming in production and media are things that we've got to get a grip of them. I mean, a lot of advertising agencies are struggling right now because they haven't understood it well enough or have not moved quickly enough with it. So we're at World Services, we are embracing it. We're taking it from a defense and security perspective. So caveats around what you can use and where you use it. We're building a lot of our own technologies. We have things that we are bringing to our customers that are unique, and we built specifically with their problem sets in mind. We want to go into detail about them, but we can do things and that some of the big tech companies have not even thought about doing yet, because necessity has requested that. And it's interesting, we talked earlier in the podcast about the utilization of radio broadcast in the Second World War. That was cutting edge technology back then. To speak into a box on the side of somebody's hearth was incredible. We've got to adapt the same way in terms of how we do things. And really, AI is about speed and rapidity. It's about being able to do things quicker, more efficient. Some of the places where we've tried to build content are inaccessible, but through using AI engines and AI production mechanisms, we've produced very high-level content that's been able to be given to target audiences. So it's an ongoing issue. It's something that you keep moving around. It's cyclical. But we're embracing it, and we have to embrace it. The defense sector is embracing it. With a note of caution here, if you want to set up a company right now, call it whatever you like, call it rocking horse poo.ai, and you will get a contract. So one has to be cautious about the fact that everybody in government's going, if it's AI, it solves a problem for us. It doesn't. It is a tool. It will aid you. But in my opinion, humans bring something very special to this. Humans understand humans. If you want a machine to be influenced, you can just use an AI engine. But to influence humans, you have to use humans.
Yeah, and that's a challenge for the modern age. I don't know if you have a view on this, Marcus, but when you look at maybe the size, scope, scale, the budget invested into this type of work today, with the national imperative in mind versus what it will be in the future, are we going to see budgetary shifts away from? We're always going to need kinetic warfighting capabilities, but I would imagine budgets need to be invested into this aspect of warfighting pretty rapidly because this is where the majority of conflict will probably take place.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, I don't know. There is
So it sounds like I'm pitching for money from the government there.
There is investment happening that I'm aware of, but it could always be more, right? And I think a lot of it is just understanding just the risks as well as the opportunities with some of these AI tools. And I mean, I was chatting with a couple of folk from the local World Services team earlier today, and they're showing me it was about a 60-second video, a bit of content that a couple of years ago would have taken a team of 10 or 12 people, many days to put together and to perfect. And these guys were telling me that they used a couple of AI tools and got it done in less than 3 days. Like as in one person, less than 72 hours. Yeah, and now like a lot of this stuff, crap in, crap out. So there's got to be investment in training these tools and making the right data available. So there's always going to be some sort of assurance or validation function. And that's, in an environment like defence where the potential consequences of an error, can be catastrophic. They're right to take certainly from a kinetic warfighting perspective, they're right to be exercising caution.
Well, particularly with these tools and agents inside of AI, and you've spoken on this podcast around the need for speed, and how sometimes regulation and bureaucracy sometimes slow down the effects of speed, and you lose the advantage around it. So we do have that. So for those people that work in and around this type of sector, their firepower, the arsenal's a lot stronger than what it has been ever before. But to be cautioned how that's leveraged and used, because there can be a lot of consequence around it. But Simon, you seem to enjoy your job. You got a little twinkle in your eye. I notice it as you're chatting. You still like to win. You get how do you measure success in what you do?
Somebody asked me that a while ago, and I think
you probably dodged the question.
No, genuinely, I was asked this. In fact, interestingly, one of the guys came. I met up with a guy who was with the business when we first started. And he said to me, "What's the biggest success from World Services?" And it's going to sound a little bit contrite, this, and I apologise in advance. And I travel the world around the offices. We've, New York, Sydney, Singapore, London, Dubai. And do you know what? One of the things we've done is we've created a business that gives young, smart people a channel to do things that are really important, that are going to change their lives forever, in an environment that looks after them, it nurtures them, and brings them on. And I think that's the greatest achievement, to be able to do that and to focus it. It's something I care about massively, which is national security. Having been around a while and seen things go wrong, seen war, and war's terrible for anyone who's witnessed it. Myself and Marcus have witnessed it close up. If the things we do, if it can avoid war, if it can prevent conflict, if it can get into that information space and make senior leaders make different decisions that turn them away from conflict, that's a huge success. And I get up every morning believing that's what we're doing for the right reason. So yes, there is a twinkle in my eye, and it's because I believe I'm doing something I care about. I'm very fortunate. I joined the army at 19, and I've had some pretty dark days in the army, particularly in the two, Iraq and Afghanistan. But generally, I've loved my job from then to now. So I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. I do something I care about. I do it with people I care about, and we make a difference. And I think that matters.
Yeah, it sounds like interesting work. And if I was a younger person coming out of university, I'll certainly be attracted to something like that. So no doubt your websites here in Australia probably get bombarded with people looking for a job, but you have a very deep and capable team who I look forward to meeting, and it's good to see Marcus. I think you've got some talent. Marcus, I don't want to talk him up too much, but
I think we've done okay.
I know. but I can certainly see the connection and how you can add value to World Services, Marcus. But it's absolutely intriguing, and we've just covered off some of the things I wanted to chat about today. So we'll have to get yourself back when you're in town next, or your colleagues here in Australia, to to come and have a bit of a yarn to us. I think we've done pretty well without going too far into detail, and I'm sure we haven't annoyed any of your clients. So, but what I would say to them is that they're making smart decisions, looking for capabilities outside of their own paradigm, and I think that's the opportunity that we have in front of us today.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm hoping to be back to see if we can squeeze something out of the Ashes series in December. I'm not hopeful, but I'm wishful.
Well, let us know when you're next in town, and I reckon I could probably put a good lunch together, a boardroom lunch if you're here, and we can sort of bring some interesting folk into the room and have a bit of a yarn. I think that would be quite a good thing to do.
Love to, Phil. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Good one. Thank you, Marcus. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Phil.
And we'll see you again soon. Thanks for
Simon.
tuning in, everyone. We'll see you again next time on Contested Ground. Until then, bye-bye.